Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
There we go. And greetings and salutations, everybody. You have tuned into Dr. Judy WTF, which is What the Freud, here on Universal Broadcasting Radio Network. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg, who is actually the founder of Dr. Judy WTF, as well as the Psychological Healing Center. We are heard every Thursday, because a lot of you have been asking, 8 p.m. Pacific here on ubnradio.com. And can be found on YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. And we're going to do a really interesting show. We're probably going to do about a 4-part series on the family dysfunction from a narcissistic perspective, because it turns out there's about 4 different types of children from narcissists. There's the mascot, which is like the clown. There's the scapegoat, of course there's the golden child, and lastly is the lost child, which we're going to focus on this evening, in addition to family dysfunction. But before we dive into that, and of course we're going to shrink our tune, which is a very popular song by none other than the Police. So please stay tuned for that. But before we dive into that, we thought we'd talk about a little bit of national dysfunction, Dr. Judy, and just touch a little bit on, without being too political, regarding the political election that's here happening in the United States, which I'm sure nobody's heard of, next week, and deal with the 2 candidates from a narcissistic family dysfunction perspective. And it's all started, I should say, from an article I found in Yahoo News yesterday. This one comedian actually stated this. He says he's going to alienate half his audience because he's picking a candidate. And he said basically his main reason for voting for Hillary is because we have had enough fathers in our country, and he wants the first mother, a mom that feeds you, teaches you, and gets stuff done.
Okay.
So there you go.
So today is November 3rd. We're 5 days away from election, and I don't think that I've ever recalled an election where it split the nation this much. And if any of you have been listening to my previous shows, the mind map was really constructed to address global disconnect. So I wanted to introduce a little bit of what global disconnect is and bring it down to a national disconnect, because I've certainly brought it down to a micro level, healing human disconnect. And so now we've got a disconnect in our very own country. And so I kind of want to talk about the candidates more as metaphors than anything else. And so basically, we talk a lot about narcissism and mothers and fathers who injure us. And so we have 2 candidates, and I think that most people, I'd love to hear your opinion, so please call in.
You know what? And this is a call-in show tonight. And if you are lost and either politically or as a lost child, which you'll be learning more about, please call us. You can call us in the United States at area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. Or if you're from outside the country, you can use Skype, and that's UBN Radio number 2. That's Universal Broadcasting Network, UBN Radio number 2.
Okay, so if you put the mind map up, I'm going to explain things from a global disconnect, or in this case, an American disconnect point of view.
And those of you that are listening, you can check it out at drjudywtf.com.
And also I have a website called healingglobaldisconnect.com, and you can read about my intentions there for putting that website up. So with the mind map up, let's take a look at that and start with the premise that, ideally speaking, we are one united nation.
In a perfect world.
In a perfect world. And unfortunately, we fracture off into what I call isms. So if you go to panel number 5 and you look at defense mechanisms, they represent all of the factions, the different factions, different race, different religion, different socioeconomic class, different politics. So we're now fractured off into a whole lot of isms. And the goal in my idealistic world is to come together as a united humanity. So I hope that consciousness wins out, and that's a very broad and general statement, because what I mean by that is that things that don't have sustainability go into panel 4, 5, 6. They go into chaos, defenses, and breakdowns. So,
gee, we haven't seen any of that.
Yeah, we haven't seen any of that.
No,
so if we set our consciousness in the right place, and we come from a consciousness of unity, and we come from a consciousness of uniting the nations, in particular, uniting the United Nations, I'm hoping that light will shine through, no matter who that person is deemed to be more of the light. So, with that said, every single candidate has their darkness and their light, okay? Every single one of them. In a big picture way, coming from the perspective of narcissism, which merely means the injured self, the core injured self, I think we can safely say that both candidates, and I'll just say that all individuals are injured in various ways.
Some ways or another.
Typically, when people get up in front of the country and want to win, and they want to run the show, there's a level of narcissism involved, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, probably a combination of the two. And so in looking at the two candidates, one represents male energy, which is Mr. Donald Trump, and the other one represents female energy, which is Senator Hillary Clinton.
Secretary of State Clinton.
I'm sorry, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
And in essence, these two energies are clashing. So if we look at the Jungian philosophy of the archetypes, what we're seeing here is the male energy and the female energy are not getting along. Sound familiar? From a big general perspective.
It's got to be one big happy family.
One big happy family. And what have we been talking about on our shows? We've been talking about dysfunctional families. So now we have a dysfunctional family. We've got a mother figure and we have a father figure. Okay? And one is obviously more overt and the other one is obviously more covert.
Is that overt and covert?
Overt and covert.
From a narcissistic perspective?
From a point of view of, yes, from a point of view of they're the center of attention. They want to get something done. And so one is known as coming right out and being in your face, and that's the covert, and we all know who he is, hint, hint.
Yes.
Okay? And then there's the covert with the secrecy and the FBI investigations and erasing things. And so in essence, being that they have the darkness and light, I'm going to focus on the darkness for a minute because we're really looking at the covert and the overt as choices for our leaders of the country, which is very similar to a family system. Okay, so if we have a dysfunctional mother and a dysfunctional father, I term that the double dungeon effect, and I think that's why we're seeing so much splitting here, because I think that people just don't know which way to turn. They don't feel that many people are electing people by default. They're not saying, "Oh my God, I'm just in love with this candidate or in love with that candidate." They're saying, "Which is the worst of two evils?"
Yes, the lesser of two evils
the
is
lesser
the most
of two evils
common
is
phrase.
the most common position people are in. And so the point is that I believe that our candidates are on some level replicating the dysfunctional families that are inherent in our culture today. And the reason they're so prevalent in our culture is because we're disconnected. Okay, we're disconnected. We don't put people as priorities. We put agendas as priorities. We put selfish agendas as priorities. And so I think we're seeing this big fractioning off on a national scale, and it's making people feel very uncomfortable. I also have a theory, and I would love to hear from the audience. I have a theory that people who have daddy issues are going to be more offended by Trump. Okay, and they're going to vote for Hillary. And people who have mommy issues are going to be more offended by Hillary and are going to vote for Trump. I'd love somebody to take on that dissertation. It would be fascinating. So anyway, we're going to talk about family dynamics, and I know that this is just the beginning of the reaction to our candidates, because as the election gets closer and closer, I think people are going to be in a more reactive state. And then after the election, I'm curious to know how people are going to respond, no matter which way the election turns out. So please do call in. I'm really
again, our call-in numbers here in the United States,
thoughts.
since we're talking about our election, is area code 323-843-2826. So if you want to chime in, we would love to hear your perspective.
Yes.
Now, in dealing with narcissism, and we're going to talk about the lost child, reading one article, this was very interesting. Narcissistic parents do to their own offspring what narcissistic parents do to their offspring is nothing less than soul murder. I thought that was
That's
very
pretty profound
statement.
Right.
I just read that and it just
Right.
jumped out at me from the page.
Right.
Soul murder. And
Right.
how do they do that? Well, why don't we start with the narcissistic family tree? There's a bunch of traits that narcissistic families in general have, and then we'll dive in and dial in a little bit more in the lost child. Okay. So bottom line is there's pain everywhere.
Yes.
Mom's got pain, dad's got pain, and as a result of all that, the kids get pain, and it's profoundly dysfunctional. So the first is there's lots of secrets. Yep. Family secret is that the parents aren't meeting any of the children's emotional needs, and they could be abusive, but of course on the outside, everything is just wonderfully perfect.
Right.
It's
That's
very
the
rosy.
saving face, right?
That's the saving
That's
face.
the fake self.
Then, of course, along those lines, there's the image. The narcissistic family is all about the image, about looking good. We are bigger, better, and have no problems, and we got to put on a face of perfection. But of course, behind closed doors, it's anything but, right? They want me to make sure you always put a smile on your face. Next is negative messages. Children are given and unspoken messages. Say you are not good enough, you don't measure up, you don't valued, you are valued more for what you do than what you are.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work
Value
with
on
people
what
around
you
that.
do versus who you are.
I have a lot of patients who are valued for what they do, and so they become people pleasers, and they don't understand that we have inherent value. A baby doesn't have to do much to be loved, just be. And so this is a big revelation for many who have been in the doing world, to please.
And we just had a 3-part series on people pleasing. So if you have an issue with that, please check it out. And we had some great phone calls. Lack of parental hierarchy. I thought this was interesting. There isn't any.
Yeah.
It's all about serving the parents. And the children are the ones that are there to serve the parents' needs and be narcissistic supply for that. Lack of emotional tune-in, which I think is another loaded one. Parents, they really don't tune into their kids because they can't feel empathy or unconditional love. And what they do instead is they're very critical and very judgmental. And that obviously is kind of challenging. Lack of effective communication along those lines. And I added here strangulation. Okay, the most common means of communication in the narcissistic family is strangulation.
Triangulation. Not strangulation.
Triangulation.
That was our other show. Parents that get killed by their
That
children.
was last week for Halloween.
Right.
Yes.
Triangulation.
Mom tries to control the whole shebang, and everybody's
Yes.
got to go with your mom. And if not, then it doesn't count. So information is not direct. It's told through one party or another in hopes to get back to that party. They don't confront each other directly. And so the byproduct is very passive-aggressive behavior, tension, and mistrust. And communication, when information is direct, again, it's often a form of anger and rage.
No peaceful healing dialogue.
Absolutely no peaceful anything.
Right. And by the way, if you want a copy of the Peaceful Healing Dialogue, it's up on my website under resources. So some of you don't know what I'm talking about here, but I've created a dialogue to help people to stay connected and to be able to express their feelings without regressing, without setting off reactivity. So check it out. It's called the Peaceful Healing Dialogue.
Even if you only use a part of it, it's an incredibly powerful way to have a discussion with somebody. Doesn't matter whether it's a spouse, a child, somebody at work, and it's all on one page. And it's very easily read.
And I'm not hearing a lot of peaceful healing dialogue in the presidential debates. I don't know.
Presidential anything.
Yeah, no. No peaceful healing dialogue.
Unclear boundaries. There are very few boundaries in a narcissistic family. Children's feelings are not considered important. Private diaries are read, right? If you got a diary, mom's going to read that.
No boundaries,
sucker.
violations.
None. Right. Physical boundaries are not kept in the least. Emotional boundaries aren't even respected. And the right to privacy is not typical part of the family. So, I mean, mom's everywhere, wants to know everything, for example. One parent, a narcissist, the other parent is what they call orbiting. I was chatting with somebody about this regard. One parent is narcissist. The comma is the other parent's there to revolve around the narcissist to keep the marriage intact, or they may be gone just so they can survive life because the spouse is so narcissistic. The other questions have redeeming qualities and offer the children, but is tied up in meeting the needs of the narcissistic spouse or leaving the children's needs unmet.
So this is a very imbalanced system.
Yes.
There's no executive control here, and it's all about supplying the parent with their narcissistic supplies, which is why the children become the identified patients. They become sick. Either they're smothered, either they're over-idealized, which is, we'll talk more about this, the golden child, or there is the mascot, right? The entertainer, who has the fake self to keep the smile going, the fake smile going, or there is the
scapegoat.
The scapegoat, which is the kid that's beaten up usually and demeaned, devalued, destroyed, and then there's the lost child who's completely ignored
and very disappeared.
Right. So in order to form a healthy human psyche, we have to have connection. We have to have connection in the form of eye contact, skin contact, breastfeeding, a sense of unconditional love and peace surrounding that child. And in the case of this dynamics, it's quite the opposite. And instead of parents taking care of their children, it's the opposite. It's children taking care of their parents. So they bleed out.
And they grow up real fast.
They do. They're adultified children. They don't have childhoods. I'm working with a particular person who really suffers from this, and he's having a lot of revelations at this point, and he's beginning to understand that he had to take charge. He had to take the driver's seat. And it was such a stress on him. And then he felt horrible that he didn't know how to drive and that he couldn't see his way through the situation. And he guilted and shamed himself about this until I pointed out to him that really he wasn't even supposed to be in the driver's seat at age 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And, it's just way too young. And so the sense of relief, knowing that it wasn't his fault, was really, really tremendous. So these are just the dynamics and the fallout material of what it's like to be in a narcissistic family.
How about siblings are not encouraged to be close?
Well, of course not, because then they're going to take attention away from mother and father.
They're a challenge from the narcissistic parent at that point. A threat.
Right.
In healthy families, we encourage our children to be loving and close to each other, right? In a narcissistic family, children are pitted against each other. There's competition.
Like in elections? No, I had to add that in.
Just like an election.
Just like an election.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they rarely grow up feeling emotionally connected to each other. Again, I talked to another friend recently who got reconnected with their brother, and it was amazing how they really did like each other, and obviously they had a lot of commonality with growing up and whatnot.
Right.
But when they were together in the family, when they were younger, it was not even in the vocabulary, not even in the stratosphere.
And you know, Walt, oftentimes the siblings think that it's the other sibling's fault that they're not getting along. And when I put it into a systems thinking kind of way, they can then see that it was really the parents that were the cause.
Absolutely.
Because they created all of this tension and all of this rivalry. So how could they love each other?
Right, exactly.
Right.
And then, of course, feelings. They're denied and never discussed. They're taught to stuff and repress, not be in touch with their own feelings, and lack of accountability and honesty because mom and dad don't have any either. So it's sort of a modeling and matching. A couple more. Not good enough message. Again, if you're always being criticized and yelled at, what are you going to grow up and learn? You're not good enough. And last I checked, if you go home tonight and you look in the mirror at your forehead, I want you to find out if you were born with the phrase on your forehead, not worthy, not good enough. And if you find it, I really would like you to call us because I'd really like to hear from you at area code 323-843-2826.
So we're not born sick, we're made sick.
Yes.
Unless we've got some sort of organic problem going on, unless there's some severe chemical imbalance. And even in that case, we have to understand that the mind and body are interconnected. So if we're neglected and if we're tortured, if we're physically, emotionally, sexually abused and or smothered and neglected, it's going to interfere with the neurochemistry and the biochemistry of the brain because the mind and the body are so connected. A great example I like to use to point out that theme is that imagine if you're biting into a lemon, okay? And if you really imagine it very powerfully, you will actually experience, you could try this at home right now. Just imagine that you're biting into a lemon. What's happening with your mouth? What's happening with your mouth?
Salivating.
Salivating. Okay, now, is there a real lemon there? Okay, so how come
No, there's not.
there's real saliva in response to an imaginary lemon? So it's the same concept. If we are running our system through emotions, even though there's nothing that's directly attacking us at the time, except our negative core belief, okay, we're still having the response, the biological response to that stress and to that trigger. Okay, but there is no lion chasing us, or there is no imminent danger. It's
Fight or
just
flight.
that those experiences of childhood still remain within the fiber of our being and continue to give us the anxiety, the depression, and the low self-esteem that keep perpetuating generation after generation.
So when we dive into the lost child, and this was a little new to me, this is actually suggested once again by one of our YouTube listeners.
Yes.
Hey, what about the lost child? And I said, well, goodness gracious, what about him? I mean, we had heard about the scapegoat and the golden, but there's more?
Yeah.
So, which doesn't surprise me, of course, with all the dynamics. The lost child is basically the unknown and the quiet dreamer. And in many instances in the family hierarchy of age, they're the youngest. And they typically try to stay out of the way of problems and spend a lot of time alone. So you talk about healing human disconnect. This is the most dynamic one of the bunch because they're the most disconnected. They're not there.
Right. And in terms of healthy development, the way we develop in a healthy way is we take in the parent as a, call it an interject. We digest the parent's love and nurturance, and that lives within us. But in the case of the lost child, nothing went in. So there's a sense of hollowness, there's a sense of emptiness, and a lack of core of the self. And so they don't carry within them a sense of the good enough mother, good enough father, good enough parent.
The lost child understands or feels the strain of the family is under, and as a result, they try to minimize their own demands on the parents and siblings. And therefore, often they're overlooked, but this leaves them feeling lonely, rejected and isolated. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more.
So
The
they don't ask for their needs.
No, it's why bother?
Why
Because
bother?
why bother asking for it? This was really, this is so sad. Why bother asking for their needs to be met? Because they already know, even if they ask, it's not going to be met.
It's a
So
futility.
why bother even going through the whole process of asking and then being disappointed?
Sure.
So if I don't ask, I'm not disappointed. It's just me.
Yeah.
It's a conundrum, and they get what they want, but the result is that it leaves them feeling very, very empty. But so on the outside, they may look quiet, creative,
Well-behaved.
independent, agreeable. They might be artistic or musically inclined because, again, they have time to draw or play an instrument by themselves. They're very soft-hearted. They're invisible. They're soft-spoken. They get lost in a book because they're reading books all the time. They're very well read. And they certainly do what they can to avoid conflict. That's on the outside. On the inside, they are left out, lonely, angry, fragile, sad, isolated, powerless. Again, why bother asking if you're not going to get it, right? Scared, confused, unnecessary, depressed, and possibly suicidal. That's a loaded situation right there, man. So that's many ways. And so if you have any of those feelings and have felt lost, you know what? You can get on the couch with your emotional knowledge with Dr. Judy. We would really love to hear from you. And again, UBN Radio number 2 on Skype or 323-843-2826 here in the United States.
The problem is that they don't have a healthy means of expression, which is what we
do not.
talk about as a pathway to healing. As Walt likes to say, don't go ahead.
Do
Walt.
not explode or implode, but get on the couch to Dr. Judy or call the show and unload.
Right, and the lost child can't unload because he or she has nobody to unload to because
No.
they don't have empathy. So
No.
parents don't have empathy.
No.
They don't encourage communication, and they're not seen and heard. So again, why bother? So they keep these feelings within, and when they keep these feelings within, the feelings build up, and instead of exploding, in the case of the lost child, they usually implode, and that's why
And
they can suicide.
We have a call.
Wonderful. Okay.
Hey, thanks for calling in and being on the couch to Dr. Judy. You're on the air.
Yes. I was listening to your show about the golden child.
Yes.
Yes.
One of the things I experienced was my parents would isolate us and have one person believe they were the golden child. Then they'd go to the other person, the other brother, and then tell them they were the golden child.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
And
Creative,
then
huh?
Then they come back and then tell you, no, you're not. You're the lost child. And then they go back and tell them, no, you're the lost child. He's the golden child. And
Yeah.
keep this.
Jeez.
What a shell game.
What's your name, please?
This is Mike.
Hey, Mike.
Nice to meet you. And where are you from?
I'm here in California.
California. Okay. So what a way to keep the family
shell game.
crazy. That's the schizophrenic mother that we talk about in, supervision when we're learning to be psychologists, meaning it's so crazy making. You don't know your position. And when children, as you know, they soak in the parental message. So, Mike, when a child is soaking in that they're wonderful and then the next moment they're told that they're terrible, what does that do to a child?
Yeah, it's like a moving target. You don't, you just, and then what happened is our brother and I got so confused
Yeah.
that
It's understandable.
what we tried to do was make each other into the parental love that we wanted from them, but
Amazing.
then we fight with each other because of these, I want to be the golden child, no, you're the
So on the one hand, it sounds like you played a lot of parts with each other. On the one hand, you wanted to repair the situation and be the good parent, and then on the other hand, the dynamics created a competition, right? so
Right.
that you felt that you had to narc each other out.
Oh, right.
Right,
Exactly.
but you guys complied. You complied with what mom and dad assigned you to do, which is to devalue each other, overvalue each other, switch roles, overvalue, devalue, and none of it was connecting, was it? I mean, this doesn't lead to interconnection and brotherly love.
No, I kind of got the sense that they kind of enjoyed it. It was like entertainment for them to watch.
That's sick.
And how was it for you? Did you feel like
It's
it was
confusing.
confusing?
Yeah, because when I was with my brother, we thought we were friends, we thought we were close, but then all of a sudden, this behavior or certain words would come out, or anger or some, and it's like the typical Smothers Brothers. Mom liked you best. No, she liked me best. No, Dad
Right.
did this with me, and he didn't do that with you. And
So isn't it amazing how you guys complied with the family system? So it's very, very hard to blueprint a new blueprint. You went along with the blueprint that your parents created, which is somebody has to be better and somebody has to be worse. Somebody has to win and someone has to lose.
Exactly.
There is no other
There's no middle ground.
There's no other system available. So in your adult life, so would you say that what dynamics do you repeat most of all? Do you repeat mostly that you want to be esteemed, that you feel that you switch back and forth between feeling demeaned and overvalued? What's going on in the here and now, given that those were your dynamics back in the day?
Oh, yeah, because it's kind of like a continual navigation where you get into situations, and rather than you just seeing yourself as yourself, you try to make a determination of a status. I'm the one that's being taken advantage. I'm the scapegoat. No. They really do like me. They really do like me. They don't. You're kind of like jumping around. So
Jumping around. Okay, you're
Yeah,
at
so-
the.
so
I
you're-
call it
you're-
at the effect of. You're not the cause of. You're at the effect of.
correct. Yes.
So it sounds like you've obviously identified this of what happened, the dynamics. How'd you guys figure it out? I mean, you've done some work.
I've been watching your program, so it's been really helpful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much.
What's really kind of interesting is as I talked to my brother about that, he's threatened by it because it's dismantling his source of security, because he's
right.
like worked out some ways to use it to get power and things.
Well, if you call power security, and when you have nothing else, then power is security. And then there's another kind of security, which is based on interconnection and actually forming relationships. So if you know about the mind map and you know about panel 7, which is the diagram of the interconnection where relationships take place, right? There's a lot of light in relationships, but what you guys were trained to do is to be isms, competitive isms. And so you go at each other and you destroy each other's light, and then there's no interconnection and there's no way for the relationship to go. So to grow, it never evolves, it keeps devolving. So how's your relationship with your brother today?
Yes, it's interesting. Both where our refuge wound up becoming was when we became teenagers. We wound up playing music together in like a music band.
Okay, which is
And
very
that-
connecting.
Yeah, and that was kind of our therapy. That was
Nice.
we could do that and be in the moment, and so as long as we were doing that, but once we stopped, boy,
Jeez. So you had that little island of competency, I like to call it.
Oasis.
Where you guys, that little oasis where you were able to have the symbiosis, the relationship. But then as soon as you stopped with that musical system, so to speak, it all went back to right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse. And so it's interesting. So your brother actually saw some of the YouTube videos that we produced?
No,
I was just saying, you haven't. Have you been able to convince him to watch any? Yeah.
No, he's
No.
turned into a very fundamentalist Christian kind of person. So
Okay.
his position is if it's not about Jesus and the Bible and Scripture, he doesn't want to.
Okay.
So interesting, because you're right. Whenever anything is a therapeutic intervention shakes the system. There's no question about
it
that.
does.
It's supposed to bring down the old system. And you can't just bring down the old system. You have to have a new system in place, right? So you have to substitute the old way of being, which is the competitive way of being, and introduce a new flavor, which is interconnection. Okay,
Yeah.
and he doesn't know how to play the game. Why? Because it's not his fault. It's not your fault. It's because your parents didn't know how to create that role modeling, and their parents didn't know how to create that role modeling. So of course he's threatened. He doesn't want to hear about this because then he doesn't know how to do it. And then there's another part two to that. When you interconnect with another human being, you have to be able to trust that other human being because you're letting them in. And with narcissistic parental dynamics, trust has been broken. So there's no possibility to even entertain the idea of interconnection. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Well, and also from our dynamic, he's in the church, and I'm not here to knock it. I'm a Christian myself. He's had the Heavenly Father, and he's got a new family and whatnot. So he's kind of eased into another dynamic from hopefully a functional family, and dynamics from that regard as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's on one hand, I think it's really good for him because he was in a lot of trouble when he was he was a teenager.
So you found stability.
Yeah, so I mean, he's rather than say therapy or wanting, because when I talk about things like psychology or his first, why are you digging up the past? Leave the past out of this. Just go on with your life. And he gets other family members. You keep talking about the past. You're digging up the past and blaming people. Why don't you just? And it's like, no. I'm just trying to be aware of the patterns.
Well, right, and as Carl Jung said, that if you keep the unconscious in an unconscious place, it'll rule you, and you'll call it fate. So it does serve us to bring the past up, not for the sake of just bringing the past up, but to complete the psychological business, as Freud liked to say. Okay, just end the cycle, end the pattern, finish it up so it doesn't keep reverberating generation to generation.
The Bible talks about multi-generation, and you're trying to address it so you can put the skids on it and stop it. So otherwise the past will repeat itself.
So you became the curious brother, and you became the psychologically brave brother to open this up and confront it. And so is that what you've chosen to do for yourself, is to really take a journey of investigation and see how...
Oh, most definitely.
Most definitely. Yeah, I really appreciate that.
Have you dove into and investigated Dr. G's book? Because it's an immense help.
Yes, I have a copy. I'm reading.
Great, thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
So we're thinking more like a shrink.
It's just what's happening though is as I read the book and I feel enthusiastic, and I begin to share with other family members. And what happens? It becomes very telling because you start to see reactions that you didn't think were going to occur because you see that people were invested in these structures more than you thought.
Yeah, totally. And so, in a way, the book that I wrote is a danger to old systems. So if you want to continue, right? I mean, it's really tearing it down. At one point, I'd love to do a webinar. It would have to be by popular demand, but one of my fantasies is to do a mind map webinar and invite people to call in and jump in and ask me questions, and I can do a whole presentation of the mind map and go from soup to nuts.
We've talked about doing that, Dr.
Yeah,
Judy.
I think
we're
going to do that next year.
We were going to start, we talked about it before, we mentioned on air, we're going to do a webinar in the mind map, about an hour webinar to go through all 9 panels. And
then people can call in.
Or inquire on during the webinar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I really, really appreciate you calling in.
Thank
and
you.
Keep in touch with us. Okay.
Okay,
And
thank you very much.
let me know how you're doing, and let me know if you have any questions and if I can answer any of the questions for you.
So thanks for
All
calling.
right, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Mike.
When you look at the lost child, there's they excel in being out of sight, as we've said, and this child expects nothing. And wouldn't you know it, how to make their own wants known is if they can't identify them. So they disconnect from the family and themselves, and they hide from the chaos, and therefore they reduce the stress in the family by being invisible.
So they comply. In
Yes.
some sense, they comply
Yes.
with the family system
Yeah.
because now they've gotten the subtle, not so subtle message that they don't exist. So then they comply with just not existing. So then they don't.
But then the net result is they can go one of two paths. So the child can take either one of two paths. First, they're super independent,
Okay.
which it can handle everything for themselves. Let alone leave me alone. I'll do it for myself. Remember the abiding belief that this child is that I must not burden anyone ever,
Yeah.
so I will do it by myself.
So it becomes their motto.
And unfortunately, it's a challenge in
myself.
relationships. They can't connect to another individual because they're so independent and they've been doing everything so far up to this
right.
point by themselves. And so it's very difficult for them to get connected and interconnected with another individual.
And a relationship is about interdependence, not independence, and not
Or-
codependence.
Correct.
It's interdependence.
And so therefore it's because they become socially awkward. So the second is they become socially awkward and uncomfortable with others. If the focus moves to them, they panic. They are unable to express emotion because they have learned that it doesn't pay.
Sounds like the beginning of covert narcissism in some sense.
Yeah.
In some
So
sense.
as a result, they are attached to pets and toys. They'd rather than people. And although they may have one super close friend in their life, which is not uncommon. So, but emotions are pointless. This is just amazing because a child never learns how to
obviously, right?
forge.
In the family, it's pointless.
It is very pointless, and it is pointless, and it's really a shame. And they never learn how to forge normal, healthy relationships, and they seem aloof. Aloof is the norm. So therefore, and then add, sadly, of course, they become depressed and suicidal because of their isolation. So
Right.
that's pretty wild.
And that's the effect of narcissistic parenting. In the book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, I talk about the effects of narcissistic parents on their children. And so this is what you're seeing. I see it a lot in my practice, children who really bleed out as a result of trying to please their parents, or children who feel that they don't exist, have extremely low self-esteem, children who feel really powerless in the family dynamics. It comes up in couples therapy a lot, where the father might demean, devalue, destroy the son, and then the son might then try to power over his family and act as if they're kind of like leaders, but they're not real leaders. They're more like angry little children.
I'm sure that goes over well.
Yeah, real well.
Just a few more, and then we've got to go to our song. Many times they're the chameleon, because again, they're just trying to get by and kind of like adjust and fit in. They're the ones who adjust and also act in a codependent manner. They are also the ones that maybe go more towards drugs and alcohol addiction.
The hole in the soul.
Hole in the soul,
Right.
which means maybe food disorders or early pregnancy. Again, maybe to escape where they're at.
Or escapisms like porn, using porn
Yeah,
as a way.
we've got one call here. We're going to take it real quick.
Okay.
Hi, you're on the couch with Dr. Judy and Walt. We've only got about 2 minutes. Can
Go
you be quick?
Oh, yeah. Oh, actually, no. Let me just call another time.
Okay, you know
Okay,
what? We'll be doing
please
it again
do.
next week, so please call in. Earlier, the better. It'd be fabulous. We're on from 8 to 9 Pacific.
What's your name and where are you from, so we remember you?
Oakley,
Oakley, and where are you from?
Utah.
Utah.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Please call
Oakley.
back, and I'm
Appreciate it
sure
a lot.
there will be a lot of opportunity. And you can always call me and text me, or not text me, but email me is a better way.
Yeah,
And
or you can
ask,
write.
ask questions,
Yeah.
and Well, we try to answer the questions, and if I don't get to the questions, I have a beautiful staff of people who have volunteered to answer many, many more questions, because we have many, many questions, and I really want people to have answers to these questions. So I've put my staff to work at answering questions. So, definitely
Okay.
locally
So
call back.
thanks.
Okay?
Call next week.
Yeah, thank you very much
Okay.
for
We'll look forward
calling
to
All
it.
right. Thank you.
Okay.
bet. Bye.
Okay.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
They look at what's happening in the firstborn and decide that this job just doesn't look like any fun.
Okay.
They look at the secondborn or the scapegoat and say, you know what, they're getting killed and blamed for everything. So that's
Right.
not my bailiwick
No,
either.
they don't want to be that one either.
No, so
Nope.
what they do is they do not want to get in trouble, so they keep everything inside and they keep very
Right,
quiet,
right.
and they give people what they want just because that way they've appeased them.
Mm-hmm.
But inside, again, they feel angry, upset, depressed, not good enough. And on the outside, they appear profoundly calm, sweet, and light. No problems, no strong opinions. They can handle anything. But inside's a totally different situation.
And the point is that neither one of these members of the family, whether it be the scapegoat, the golden child, the lost child, or the mascot, none of them are really all that happy, because even the golden child, you think the golden child's happy? He or she has to deal with being hated because they're so special. And
Or the pressure of being the golden child.
Or the pressure of having to keep it up.
Yeah.
Or
The fear that they're going to lose it.
The fear that they're going to lose a position, like Mike was talking about. Now you're the golden child, and now you're not. Now your brother's the golden child. We've switched on you. So it's just one family mess.
It's definitely a very untasty stew.
Tasty is right. Yeah.
So that is our show. Thank you so much for all the call-ins. We look forward to more. And we're now going to switch to our song, which this week is we shrink a tune every week, where I'm going to read the lyrics of a popular song, and this one certainly is. And then Dr. Judy is going to interpret it from her psychological and mind map perspective. And this one's by The Police, as I mentioned, and it's Message in a Bottle, which has been around for a while, but it's a fun song, and a friend of mine suggested it.
And we're choosing it to represent the lost child. Yes.
Just a castaway, an island lost at sea, another lonely day with no one here but me. More loneliness than any man can bear. Rescue me before I fall in despair.
Well, there's no rescuing because the parents are apathetic. And the person is feeling exactly the way you've been describing, a deep sense of loneliness, a deep sense of feeling lost, and a desire to be rescued.
I send out an SOS to the world. I hope that somebody gets my message in a bottle. A year has passed since I wrote my note, but I should have known this right from the start. Only hope can keep me together. Love can mend your life, but love can break your heart.
So there's a hope that this SOS will go through, but, the message is in a bottle. Who knows whether the bottle will get to the intended person or anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all bottled up. That's another metaphor. Their feelings are all bottled up, but nobody's hearing them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's good. Walked out this morning. Don't believe what I saw. 100 billion bottles washed up on the shore.
Wow.
Seems I'm not alone at being alone. That's a great line.
Yeah.
100 billion castaways looking for a home.
That's just so profound, because this
incredibly
person,
profound.
it's such beautiful poetry, because this person feels so alone, and now he's seeing, wow, there's an epidemic going on. Everybody's so alone. There's hundreds of billion castaway people feeling the same way, looking for a home, and I think he's referring to that internal home, the connection.
Seems I'm not alone at being alone.
Yeah.
I'll send it out an SOS to the world. I hope somebody gets my message in a bottle. Sending out an SOS.
What a beautiful song, and how appropriate for the lost child who never gets heard, and she's sending out this SOS, and it's not being received.
Just remember, you're not alone at being alone. And you can do that by calling the Psychological Healing Center and dealing with Dr. Judy or her staff. And we can do this on the phone through Skype and, of course, in person in Beverly Hills or Sherman Oaks. Or you can write us with questions, which we get a lot of, at info@drjudywtf.com. And we read and respond to pretty much everything that comes in.
We try to, and we're catching up.
And
I really
we've
have my
got a lot
staff
of
on it now.
get
They're
the staff
gonna
on
be
there.
answering
Yep.
a lot of questions.
And so you can catch up, of course, as YouTube, iHeartRadio, all our shows, iTunes, and otherwise. So next week, we're going to continue our narcissistic dysfunctional family and figure out which narcissist may be president of the United States and deal with the scapegoat child. So stay tuned, and thanks so much for your calls and letters. And until then, take care, everybody. And now we're going to send you a message in a bottle. I'm Walt Lusk, of course, with Dr. Judy Rosenberg here at UBN Radio Network.
Thank you, Walt.
God bless everyone.